What do you need to know from Cutdown Day? That and more this week on the couch. Alan Seslowsky. Alan, what do the folks out there need to know from everything that went down yesterday, Cutdown Day?
You know, I'll answer your question, but every time I hear that theme music, the Sigmund Freud voice, is that a Dr. Phil sample in there as well? Is that Dr.
It's actually it's a totally random YouTube video that I found searching Sigmund Freud.
To me, what it is, it's like when you used to sit down and watch The Sopranos and you heard the theme song come on, or a Game of Thrones. Like, you just knew for the next hour, didn't matter what was going on, you were going to be entertained. But what do we need to know from Cutdowns? A wise man once told me, and you have to tell me who this wise man was, that information is not the commodity anymore. It's being able to filter the information. And that wise man is sitting to my right. You told me that last year. You said someone's going to spill the puzzle pieces out on the table. It's your job just to put them together. And I think the Marlon Mack cut means that you're not going to get Dameon Pierce if you're a disciplined drafter. I also think that the San Francisco 49ers have basically told you that they're keeping their side chick around. Yeah, they're not all in on this relationship. And doesn't mean that Trey Lance doesn't have the upside or is going to be a good pick. But again, it's if you're putting a lot of money or a lot of investment into your drafts and you're facing the Trey Lance versus Russell Wilson or Matthew Stafford pick, you're going to now think twice about it.
Okay. And I've got a lot of good stuff to talk about. And I think you brought up two good headlines. And I like that you cast the Marlon Mack news not as, oh, now we know Dameon Pierce is the number one running back and that's what we learned. No, what we learned is everybody is going to be all over Dameon Pierce. It's green light, green light, green light. And there's a lot to unpack in there, right? Because you said if you're a disciplined drafter. And what I take that to mean is probably the 5th round, maybe even the 4th round. And now you're getting into A.J. Dillon. No, you're taking A.J. Dillon before you're taking Dameon Pierce. If you're taking a running back in that range, I would say actually wide receiver is probably the richer position, but they're both good. Go ahead.
When you were a little kid, you used to play leapfrog in your backyard, right? That was like a fun game. Dameon Pierce just did it in the FFPC last night to Breece Hall. There's no one that's even considering, not no one. I mean, I would say the room is now thinking of Dameon Pierce as a better pick. And I don't know if that's true than Breece Hall. I mean, everything's gone opposite directions for these two. And it just doesn't, it's tough to swallow, especially for drafters that have been doing best ball since February. If you're just walking into the room now and you just, you pick up your cheat sheet and you could just follow ADP. ADP is so sharp nowadays. Maybe you'll be more comfortable with that decision. But I think I know home league, sure, you're going to be able to always get a little bit better price. But if you're in a competitive league, and I think more leagues are competitive now than are not, you might have to take him in the 4th round, Sigmund Bloom.
Yeah. Like I said, you're getting him. Well, the point is you're going to need to be ready to be a step ahead. And I think Pierce ahead of Breece Hall makes sense, honestly. That actually makes sense to me because I can't say for sure that Hall's a better player than Pierce at this point. And certainly the kinds of things that make a player matter for fantasy in the short-term view of just 1 year, Pierce has more of those things on his side. Really, I think the bigger variable, I know a lot of people bring up Rex Burkhead, and it is true that Dameon Pierce has passing game chops, so he can be a 3-down running back. Rex Burkhead getting hurt, well, that's happened before, so that's a path for Dameon Pierce to even exceed 4th round value, although in no way, shape, or form, even with these possibilities, would I ever say to take Pierce ahead of A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon is the running back you want in this range. And then the other thing is just if the Texans are better, even if Rex Burkhead is a passing down back that takes away receiving upside and 2-minute drill upside and trailing game strip upside from Pierce, if they're just a better team, then there's fewer of those situations. So, and Pierce can be part of that. So I'm not going to talk anybody out of taking Dameon Pierce because he absolutely has in his range of outcomes to be a 2nd or 3rd round value this year. I just feel like A.J. Dillon does too and has a better chance of hitting those. Is absolutely a player. I'll say this, Alan. He's absolutely a player you have to have clarity drink on going into your draft in that like you said, if you're disciplined, and it's okay to be undisciplined. Let me say that too. It's okay to be undisciplined. In fact, if you're going to have discipline in some area of your life, fantasy football is probably not a good one, unless you're the kind of person that makes your living off of your returns from your teams. Have discipline in your diet and your exercise and things like that, and go crazy with fantasy football. Now, you said Jimmy Garoppolo is the side chick. That's interesting. Actually, he was the wife
right
until recently. Funny how those things changes, or husband, or friend with benefits. I don't know. We're getting very Freudian here.
Well, here's a way to frame it, because I think many of us have been in this situation. We were in a pretty decent long-term relationship, Jimmy Garoppolo, and you know what? We found someone else that makes us happy, or we thought, maybe a little bit younger, this, that. I mean, whatever's important to you. So we put a lot into that. We leave and we invest a lot into that. And year one, it was a little bit choppy, but okay, you know what? You invested a lot. You moved out. You're there. You're going to make it work. And what you should do when you're in a relationship is basically cut off any distractions, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're saying to yourself, wait a second, I'm not, what did I get into here, right? I mean, if this was if this was someone they were fully, Trey Lance, they were sure about, they would figure out a way to get something. But the Super Bowl window is so short in the NFL. Everyone thinks it's like, oh, for the next 5 years. No, it's like the next 18 months. And if something happens to Trey Lance, and I don't even just mean health, and he is a running quarterback, so something could happen, right? I mean, he's going to take some hits. Or if they're 2-4 and it's not looking great, Shanahan's going to start thinking about it, right? That's not good. And also, when your replacement's in the room, talk about Freudian and on the couch, psychologically, I don't want anybody staring over my back, watching the job I'm doing. All I'm saying is the upside doesn't change, but if you are in a super flex league and you're taking Trey Lance in the first round, or in a dynasty league, and you're investing for life, this concern was always there. Jimmy Garoppolo was always on the roster, and now he's in the room.
Yeah. This is one of those ones, Alan, that you can make a convincing case on both sides, right? Mike Silver, provocateur, he says absolutely this is a hedge about their confidence in Trey Lance. Matt Barrows says, no, this was a jackpot. This was Kyle Shanahan and company saying, wait, we can still keep Jimmy as our backup. We can have, as you said, in a Super Bowl window, we can have a Jimmy Garoppolo as our backup. Yes, we didn't even consider this was possible. And it was a very interesting piece of information also from Matt Barrows and Jeff Howe, Athletic, that Garoppolo himself delayed his shoulder surgery so they had trouble trading him. I haven't heard any pushback on it, so I'm accepting that as part of the record until I hear someone say, no, that's not true. Because that's very interesting, because you would think that Jimmy Garoppolo would want to play somewhere else this year to increase his potential future earnings. Now, at the same time, if you're thinking of the kind of brain that normies like us do, plebes like us, well, if he already made $100 million, who cares if you make 60 million or 10 million or 110 million for the rest of your career? And you're as good looking as Jimmy Garoppolo, right? He's got a future as like the model in Gucci or something like that. If he isn't already, maybe he isn't. I didn't even notice that. So it sounds like Garoppolo has different priorities, and maybe Garoppolo liked the predictability and decided that instead of gambling on himself, that some people might say, well, actually, if he's not showing the rest of the league his play outside of San Francisco, then he is trying to preserve his future value. I'll say this. I'll tie a bow on this topic. I mean, I'll give you a chance to add anything you want, Alan. That if you were going to take Trey Lance at a certain spot in your draft, after this news, you should still take him at that spot in your draft. Because if he is going to fail to the extent that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get the call, then he wasn't going to hit for fantasy this year anyway. And if it unnerves him that Jimmy is still in the room, then he probably didn't have that internal confidence we need to get to that next level anyway. And where I will point to as a specific real world case here is, if you say, well, what about Jalen Hurts? If Jimmy Garoppolo was behind Jalen Hurts last year, he would have got pulled, et cetera, et cetera. However, after the Eagles figured out, hey, we have this good offensive line, wasn't as good as it's going to be this year, but still good enough. Let's just go to a power running approach and let's take more off of Hurts' plate. Hurts wasn't a fantasy quarterback one. From week 8 on, he was not a fantasy quarterback one. He had some fantasy quarterback one weeks. So I would submit that even if Jimmy wasn't there, if Lance flops, then he wasn't going to hit for fantasy anyway. And then you have the D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart case to point to, that sometimes that extra motivation actually, if the players got that fortitude, got that constitution, actually is the last missing ingredient to push them to the next level. So we don't know. We could be telling a story that it was the unraveling of Lance, which I say, well, he was going to unravel eventually anyway. Or we could say this was actually part of the story of how he pulled the sword from the stone. And I think the Shanahan offense with a running quarterback, any running quarterback, is compelling enough to put a chip on. Now, like you said, I like how you framed it. Now we're talking about super high leverage picks, a first-round pick or early second-round pick, where you're saying, well, I could take Trey Lance as my quarterback too, or I could take Justin Jefferson or something like that.
Yes.
Now, that's where that little pebble on the scale may give you a little bit of pause. Anything you want to add before we turn the page on this one?
You said it 100% right. Just that in a single quarterback league, it doesn't matter. Because you're always going to have Tua on the waiver wire, right? In the high when you're weighing him against a real position player. I think you said it right. The last thing I would just tie on to that is that it's such a small sample size. We don't know. And Jimmy Garoppolo, he might do himself good to be on ice for a year, just like Mitch Trubisky did last year.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like sometimes that unknown, you take him out of those very quarterback-friendly environments in San Francisco, and you put him someplace where he would start. Any of the places he would start.
New Orleans
maybe
next
he actually
year
diminishes his view. Yeah. I want to touch on, because we want to give the people what they want, Alan. And folks, if you don't know Alan, am I saying that right, Alan? Seslowsky?
You got it right, man. You said it better than any grade school teacher I've ever had.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in an area, Western Pennsylvania, a lot of skis, a lot of itches.
SKIs or SKYs over there, right?
Both.
Okay, cool.
My mother, my aunt, and my sister all married skis. So
they did.
Yeah, it's good. A lot of solidarity with the Polish people.
Well,
Polish power. Ivan Putski, Polish power.
I mean, the best non-significant WWE guy of all time, Polish power. It's the most ridiculous thing. I had the Polish power T-shirt.
Right.
I mean, Ivan Putski.
Great Polish sports heroes like Karl Jastrzębski, right?
Oh, I thought you were gonna, that scene in Airplane.
Yarmir Yag. No, I'm saying Czechs. I'm thinking of Czechs. That ain't great Polish hockey players. Go ahead. You
remember? I thought, because I'm Jewish. I thought you were gonna quote that scene in Airplane when they ask about Jewish sports legends and they give them a piece of paper that's about the size of my thumb.
Hey, Hank Greenberg.
Well, it's
Sandy
obviously
Koufax, Julian Edelman.
There you go. That's the list.
All right, let's go on a list of things that people need and want. Let's just touch on some other stories. We can give as little or as much time as we need.
Yeah.
Sony Michel released in Miami, now visiting with the Chargers. Anything move the needle here?
Yeah, Sony Michel he's a good player. Obviously, he's got the health concerns, and the Miami felt comfortable enough to go with Raheem Mostert, right? So imagine how bad a shape Sony must have been in. But Sony Michel, as we saw, he's still going to be someone that either caps fantasy ceiling or it gives credibility to a depth chart, and the Chargers make a lot of sense. I thought that maybe Kareem Hunt would be when they were talking about trade partners that would go to LA Chargers, but this makes more sense if it's free. I mean, look what he did on the Chargers last year. He filled in admirably for a few weeks when things didn't go well. Austin Eckler has been very vocal. I don't think it's a narrative secret at all that he wants some relief, and Isaiah Spiller isn't up to the task just yet, and Josh Kelly is presumably the number 2 there right now, and I don't think anybody's overly excited about him. So a former first-round pick that can give relief in short yardage and makes a lot of sense. This doesn't hurt any of the players other than Josh Kelly if you're in a deep dynasty league or you took him in the last round of your draft. But this is exactly what Austin Eckler would need should he sign there. This is helpful to him. Yeah. He's never a big rushing touchdown guy anyway, except for last year, right?
Yeah, I think that Michel's a lunch pail back. First round running back shouldn't be lunch pail backs, but that's what he is. And the Chargers have been throwing third day picks to try to get that lunch pail back behind Austin Eckler. And they looked at Joshua Kelly as probably the guy going into the season that give him 2 chances already, and it didn't go well. Obviously, Isaiah Spiller's not instilling confidence. Larry Roundtree, I think, is just that last running back on your roster that can play special teams. So it gives Michel a lot more value, I think, than he was going to have in Miami, where we were looking at the dominoes of, well, Chase Edmonds, maybe not the most durable, unproven as a lead back, if he even is the lead back. Raheem Mostert, we're just waiting for their shoe to drop. And then it would have been Michel's turn, but they moved on $850,000 guaranteed down the drain. Not that there's that much, but I will say this: you brought up Kareem Hunt. Anybody who wants to get into sales as a career, and actually it's probably a pretty good career. I remember when I was in college, William Copeland, my policy studies professor at the Maxwell School at Syracuse, he would go through the room, because policy studies, it's like applied political science. It's like how to get stuff done in the world of bureaucracy. This was in the 90s. Cost benefit analysis, line with statistics, all that good stuff. And he would just go through the room, and like half the people he would tell them what their future job was going to be. He was like sales, 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 sales. And the rest of them, I think, were Arthur Anderson before the Enron thing. But if you want to get into sales, if you can get an NFL team to trade for a running back, you're probably going to be really good in sales, because a lot more teams want to trade running backs than want running backs. And you can even look at the depth charts, and you can see teams cutting running backs that, at least to our eyes, look like they could hang on an NFL field, and even more on the second round it's coming. And I think it was Joe Goodberry, who's always wise, said something to the effect of this second round today of waiver claims and releases is the more interesting releases, because those are players that actually made a 53-man roster getting released. So we'll see what happens. Okay, react to me. Kenyan Drake signs with the Ravens.
Yeah, Kenyan Drake is, he's a player that's been cast off by a bunch of teams, but he's a real NFL credible back. He has his warts, which is why he floats from roster to roster. But it wasn't too long ago we were taking Kenyan Drake in like the late second round, early third round, thinking he had some, that he was going to have opportunity. On all the fantasy podcasts that I've done or been on, I've been saying that I'm not going to lean into injury with J.K. Dobbins. I'm injury. Right. Basically, I stay away. We're going to have so many injuries. Injuries are going to find you during the fantasy football season. I don't like to start week 1 with them, which is why I wasn't a J.K. Dobbins drafter. And now you have Kenyan Drake on there, Mike Davis. Sure, we don't love those guys. They're kind of just guys, but this is an upgrade from what the veteran, the 2015 roster they put together last year with, what was it, Devontae Freeman, Latavius Murray. So this is an upgrade from that. And we already know that Mike Davis, he's shown that he has some pass catching chops. Kenyan Drake can do it. So it's not a great spot, but these are going to be players that once the injury bug hits, they're either going to be on waiver wire speed dial, as you like to say, or they're going to be, the last spot of your roster. Kenyan Drake was dropped in a lot of these deep dynasty leagues that I play in, and I was quick to pick him up. So this is troubling news for J.K. Dobbins. And I know everyone said, he's great in December. You got to get off to a 4-1 start if you want to have any leverage in fantasy football.
I agree. And this is why, for instance, why you might want to look into Zach Ertz. That's why I think Ertz has a little more value than people are estimating. But I think your better point to highlight there is you don't want to already take on. And now listen, if the ADP reflects it, then you maybe take on injury risk or drag on a player's value. But with J.K. Dobbins, well, it's not sure. Here's the deal with J.K. Dobbins. You're not going to play him the first week he's back. And then you're going to learn how long you might have to wait to play him. Even whenever he was breaking out as a rookie, remember, this is the Ravens organization that always holds back young running backs. Now, maybe once he's healthy, they really let him loose, but they also have Drake, they have Davis, they have Justice Hill, who there's another Achilles case for us to follow. Right. Although with Marlon Mack being released, that's another thing we're still waiting for the first successful Achilles or truly successful. Dante Foreman, does that count? I don't know. To true fantasy prominence, at least. And that affects Akers, that affects James Robinson. We can talk about that too. But I think your point of, hey, unless you're getting a deep discount, let's not take players that we already know are hurt. Now, is Jaylen Waddle in that category?
Jaylen Waddle is a player that I'm reaching to go get before this injury thing, right? I mean, I know his ADP before the Tyreek Hill signing. I mean, in best balls, he was going on the 2-3 turn, and people were up in arms about that. He fell to about the 3-4 turn, but yeah, you don't want to start the season with an injured player. But how serious is this injury? This is a training camp injury. It is concerning. It probably would if it backs his ADP off, fine, but I still think that he's a pretty rock solid pick in the 4th round, and for a couple reasons. One, he's young. 2, he showed us a part of his game to accumulate fantasy value last year that we weren't even expecting him to have. We were expecting him to be this down the field target, and he showed adaptability with the quarterback that he went to college with, and what was it, over 100 catches. So I'm still taking Jaylen Waddle if I miss out on some of the players that I like in that 4th round. And if he falls to the 5th, obviously you're going to do it. But I'm more in on Waddle at his ADP than I would be in that 2nd round with Tyreek Hill. Although Tyreek Hill, he does look like Tyreek Hill, except that you have to wonder, even though he completed that big pass, he caught that big pass from Tua, it did look like he had to come back and get it a little bit. And I don't want to make too much of one, but man, if maybe Tua has to get used to his speed, but you have to think if that was Patrick Mahomes, that would have been a touchdown. And you have to also think that maybe by week 4, Tyreek Hill goes, maybe I would have been better off in Kansas City.
Yeah. Oh man. So I'll give you my Waddle journey for the last couple of months. There was a show I was on earlier in the summer before training camp started, and they said, give me a hot take. And I said, Jaylen Waddle will outscore Tyreek Hill. And at that point, I was looking at it strictly in the idea that I'm assuming Mike McDaniel is a rational play designer and play caller. And I'm assuming that defenses are going to say, we're taking away Tyreek Hill, and let's see if Jaylen Waddle can beat us. And that in the chess player format, Mike McDaniel will anticipate that, and Jaylen Waddle actually becomes the primary target for this offense. Now, here's a few things that happen between now and then. First of all, you talked about the underthrown ball, and there's a whole topic here of how one play in the preseason should never change. No, that's not true, because you brought up Patrick Mahomes. I remember when Patrick Mahomes threw over triple coverage to Tyreek Hill the summer before he became the entrenched starter, and I immediately moved Mahomes and Hill way up my board. Like, oh boy, this is going to be something different than we've seen this way before. Matt Walden was saying it for a while, but I finally got caught up. Isaiah Likely is another interesting guy to put under that category, and maybe it's not just one play. It's one game where he was in for 15 plays and caught 9 passes for 100 yards and a touchdown. Kyle Pitts blowing past Bryce Hall. That's another possible play that we could look back and say.
Amir Abdullah?
Yeah, or sure, Abdullah. I mean, the point is sometimes it ends up being appropriate to overreact to one play.
Right. Sometimes not. Yeah.
The reaction, the seeming overreaction is actually the valid reaction. But with that underthrow on Tua, what that's accompanied with that gives me pause, Alan, and this is me, and the analytical fantasy players, just turn off the show right now if this is your first time listening to this. You're gonna find out that I like to go on feel, like to go on tuition. Again, I'll say intuition is the sum of all your experiences and knowledge boiled down to a yum or yuck, a gut feeling, but it's not mysterious. It's not plucking things out of the sky. You're actually using all of your knowledge when you have intuition. And my intuition about this Miami situation with Tua is, man, are they trying to sell us Tua? Wow. I mean, when Tyreek Hill's like, he's better than Patrick or more accurate or whatever, like, whoa, you're overselling this. Like, I get it. You want confidence. Tua needs confidence. I mean, look at Laviska Shenault, speaking of Cutdown day stories, or Alex Leatherwood. When a player's confidence is shot, it doesn't matter what your measurables are. It doesn't matter what your trap pedigree is. It doesn't matter what you did last year. It doesn't matter what you did one play ago. If your confidence is shot, you're done in the NFL. You're done. And that tells me that maybe Tua, there was one thing that stuck out to me about Tua, and I kind of feel bad for Tua when I bring this up. Okay. I remember learning that he's not left-handed. That his dad made him throw left-handed, right. Which just gives me this pause. It just gives me this pause, and it makes me feel bad for him. I'm not trying to knock him when I say that. Like, you just wonder, what would right-handed Tua look like as a quarterback? I don't know. But that point is, he's not necessarily the product of a natural trajectory. And if there's all this confidence boosting going on with all these overselling public narratives, it almost tells me it's an indicator we're going to see Teddy this year. We'll see. But that also makes me back off on Jaylen Waddle. I don't think there's an injury discount on Waddle yet, but I'll tell you where my line would be. If he falls past Darnell Mooney, if he falls past Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's not going to. He's just not going to. And it may work out because he's a tremendous talent. And Mike McDaniel, if he's rational, can deploy these pieces in a way to keep defenses off balance, assuming the offensive line is okay. I know we've been dunking on that. Speaking of Alex Leatherwood again, we're dunking on the Raiders offensive line. Man, the Dolphins have shanked a ton of picks on offensive line. They got Teron Armstead. Hopefully he'll hold up. A lot of these aging offensive tackles also not holding up. Have we seen Ronnie Stanley practice yet for the Ravens? No, we have not, among others. Okay. A lot of Jaylen Waddle talk there. I want to rewind the tape for a second. It's something you talked about. Hey, if you're a data analytical person, turn off the stream. I think that sometimes that the observational analyst, someone that's been watching every snap of football for 150 years and writing about it like yourself, you're able to pull from that observation what the stat bros sometimes need. And again, there's nothing wrong with whatever your tool is, and you're coming to the same conclusions as them, that they're, someone who needs the spreadsheet, so to speak. And again, they're just using it as confirmation for what they're seeing on the screen. Sometimes the observationalist can see it already, and the stat sheet confirms what they're seeing. So I don't think there's anything wrong with, this guy has this many air yards. He's a good pickup next week. Sure. If you watch all the football, you're seeing they're targeting him deep down the field. It just hasn't connected yet. So I subscribe to observational analytics, especially if you can talk about it from a context of watching football all the time. The numbers confirm what we observe.
There it is.
Sometimes
the metric becomes the goal, right? It's like you're trying to lose weight, and the scale, all of a sudden you're trying to lose weight to get healthy, but sometimes the scale, you're trying to reach a specific number, but you're not doing something to remain healthy. So the metric of the scale interferes what you're actually trying to do with yourself, which is get healthy, so to speak.
Yeah. And it's okay. I always like analytics as a starting point for conversations. It gives you questions to ask. It doesn't answer the questions. Only the play on the field answers the questions. And it's funny too, because I've gotten a lot more into baseball. I've talked about this on the show multiple times this year. We've been watching a ton of baseball. O'Neal Cruz is part of it. It's actually fun to be a Pirates fan again. There's actually a player I think that other teams fans, if they're watching them when they play the Pirates, I hope they're jealous, because I sure get really excited knowing that guy's going to be a Pirate at least for a little while. My point is, in baseball, I saw at the Hall of Fame dinner where all the Hall of Famers show up, that there's almost a pitchforks and torches moment about analytics in baseball, but you can't mandate to stop using analytics, but they're saying it's changing the game. The sixth tool, the brain. Well, the brain's always going to be part of football because it's so fast. You always are going to have to be able to think on your feet in football, and you have to think on your feet in fantasy football. Like everything that we knew, we're going to find out like 60% of it was bunk.
And you said, Sig, because this is what you had told me, and you've told the audience a bunch of times, is that there are very few things that happen in football that are individual stat related, except for you always point out a holding penalty, right? Yeah. Everything else is intertwined within the context. So it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's finding that weight of what you project the player to do from a skills. With my colleague, Chris Liss, always says that there's four things. There's health, there's opportunity, there's team context, and there's skills, right? Mm-hmm. Skills. So it's figuring out how that all intertwines with each other.
Right.
And to figure out what we're going to do for fantasy football.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because you can say he's not going to succeed because of team context, and for a month he won't succeed because of team context. They can say his skill is so good. Am I talking about Kyle Pitts? His skill is so good that it won't matter, and then for a month his skill is so good that it doesn't matter. We're right and wrong in the same season. Yeah. Okay, real quick on that topic of players that are we more hesitant or even taking them off of our board because of preseason injuries. Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, and by the way, I heard you just mentioned Kyle Pitts. I'll answer your question about Kadarius Toney, but I admire that you're gun shy about telling people to draft him in the third round, because you got a little
last year.
You got a little bee sting.
Shouted it from the rooftops.
Yep, you got a little bee sting last year. I understand. And listen, if you get stung by a wasp in an orchard, you're gonna not want to go back into that orchard so quickly. I understand. And Kyle Pitts is one of those guys I'm scared to death to draft him, and I'm scared to death not to draft him. And there's a couple guys like that. But Kadarius Toney, man, I mean, this guy, Yes, sometimes it's the magnitude of the sample rather than the size of the sample. I mean, you talked about baseball. If a pitcher came in his opening, his first game, and he threw 33 strikeouts, it's a sample of one man, but you're like, wait a second, 33 strikeouts is insanity. It's never going to happen, right? So whatever it is, it's like 27 strikeouts, I guess, would be the most you could have. So, but right. You're talking about Kadarius Toney. The health concern. He was going in the 6th round at some point. That is sure, it's drafting the upside. I see it, but I'm not going to take him, man. I mean, it's like if he's dinged up week 1, and then all of a sudden you play him and he goes 3 for 30, then he's not in that auto start category, right? You have to be careful with players like that. I'm much rather draft the Brandon Ayuk, someone where the momentum is going forward. Alan Lazard. At least you could tell yourself the case where Aaron Rodgers sees him as the number 1. And these guys do have, maybe lower theoretical upside than someone like Toney, but Toney's going to be a pain in the butt the whole season. I just don't want to draft those guys in my core players. I understand if somebody does. And like you always say, I'm not going to talk you out of it. That's a signature Sigmund Bloom line. Yeah. But that's not how I'm drafting my fantasy football drafts in the top 7 rounds, usually.
Yeah, he's one. He didn't make, I just did the all Rolaids team. What's up, Joe Wright? Love you, man. We're Rocky and Apollo Creed back in the day. I'm not attracted enough to Toney as a potential pick at ADP to have indigestion about whether to take him, although his talent's undeniable. I think part of it is why I feel comfortable being out on Toney, other than that he was still off and on the field because of his knee that he had surgery on this offseason, is because we're still not seeing affirmative signs yet that something's going to grow in New York with that offense. Now, that doesn't mean stay away from Barkley, because Barkley has already transcended a poor Giants offense, and he'll at least be used more competently this year. Toney, I remember last year that we basically had a microcosm of what is probably going to be his whole career in like 2 weeks, right? It's like he dazzles everybody and blows them away. He gets in some sort of scrap. He gets hurt. It's just like a fractal. Like that little 2 weeks is, you can zoom back and like that's his whole career. And I'm afraid that that's just going to be Kadarius Toney. And like you said, it's just going to be frustrating. There may be moments. I mean, his talent's going to show. I hope, just because as a football enjoyer, that we get to see his talent, his immense talent come to the surface again, and then we're all going to be in again. But I think that he's easier to be out on. And by the way, you can get 4 strikeouts. Theoretically, you could get 5, 6, 7 strikeouts in an inning in baseball. If the ball gets away from the catcher on the 3rd strike.
Right.
You can get 33 strikeouts. And there was a game this year where the Cleveland Guardians, I'm still getting used to that, had 6. They scored 6 runs after the 3rd strikeout in an inning because the catcher didn't get it.
Yeah. The point, again, I had the math screwed up, but thank you for saving me on that. But the point is, it's not always the size of the sample. Sometimes the magnitude of the sample does matter, and it did matter with him enough to keep him in our, in that range of like an 8th round wide receiver. Yeah. But even from the beginning of Kadarius Toney's career, it was weird, right? Like you had Urban Meyer saying that he wanted him instead of Travis Etienne. And already now that what we know, that's already odd. Anything Urban Meyer wants can't be good, right? He's kryptonite. And then, Gettleman trade back from, people have panned Gettleman's picks before. A lot of the really smart draft guys, even over at Footballguys, thought Kadarius Toney, myself included, wasn't really a player that you should take in the first round of drafts, that he had his warts. And then everyone was pleasantly surprised. In rookie draft, he went in like the back end of the 2nd round. He was that pleasant surprise. But there's already it's like there's so many good options available in those ranges. Why lean into that stuff? I understand the nuclear upside, but just save those swings for the round 9 through the end of your draft.
Yeah, like you said, there are just more. It's always a proposition of, well, what are you passing on? There are a few backfields we got some news on, or at least developments. Let's start with Washington. And I want to say real quick, folks, carjacking has been on the rise big time here in New Orleans. And it's actually changed our behaviors whenever we are getting in and out of our car. It's changing our habits. I remember when I went up to Michigan a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I both talked about how, I had to remind myself the first, second day I was there, like, you don't have to be looking around when you get out of your car. So what matters here is just, speedy recovery to Brian Robinson, who seems like a sanguine dude, right? What I'm learning about Brian Robinson as a human, I really like through this. But we at least have the news as of right now while I'm talking to you. He's on the 53-man roster. He's not on the NFI list, which would be the first 4 games, but it's still possible he could be put on the NFI list, but at least there's a possibility he won't be. What's the bottom line recommendation for Washington running backs in drafts?
What a roller coaster ride of value for Antonio Gibson, man. If this was, Great Adventure, whatever park you're on, I would be, I'd be sick from the ups and downs of this. I mean, that's just a fantasy football value. Now, everything you said about Brian Robinson, great. I mean, it's, it seems like all those pictures of him on the crutches with the bandage on his leg, he's smiling. He's smiling.
He brought Oreos, right?
It's unbelievable. So,
real quick story. I won't name his name, but when I was here for Mardi Gras '98, there was a couple. Don't pee outside during Mardi Gras. That is the one thing that will get you thrown in jail, and you will be in jail until the end of Mardi Gras. And our friend, we were getting out at the end of Mardi Gras, right there at the corner of Broad and Tulane, get him out across the street from the jail. It was late at night too. And he actually had a bar of soap. He went to the convenience store and got it. We were like, how are you? Are you okay? You were in jail for all this time and you're an OPP. He's like, no, I remember to get you guys soap. That's what I thought of when I saw Brian Robinson with his Oreos.
Yeah. And by the way, I warned a friend of mine not to do public urination in front of the boot, and he did it. And like within seconds, he was cuffed and put in the back of a car.
They come out of the woodwork like the agent in the Matrix, like they're waiting for you.
Yeah, because and by the way, I'm happy they are doing that. It's like put an adult diaper on, man. If you can't get into one of the places,
pay the $3 to just even if you don't want to drink, and get the drink too.
There you go. Yeah, right. Get your hurricane, get your hand grenade, do whatever you need to do. Washington backfield. All right, so. In addition to the Brian Robinson that he's, let's treat it as like a 2-month injury. Let's just think of it like the best case scenario, right? He's not going to be back before Thanksgiving in my mind. That's how I'm playing it. And then the team lets go of Jared Patterson, who, was an undersized back, but was somebody that they probably could possibly siphon off a few carries. So now you're left with Antonio Gibson, who was RB10 last year. Okay, let's not write him off. We know it's been a terrible preseason as far as it's been well documented, the special teams, the fumbles on the goal line. And this is a prime spot for a cast-off veteran to land. I mean, Marlon Mack could end up there, right? I mean, who knows?
And they did keep Jonathan Williams, speaking of cast-off vets.
There you go. And who everyone, he's going to be a popular waiver wire guy. I mean, think about it. If Antonio Gibson went down in week 3 or missed some time, you're right. That's a speed dial guy that was going to be on our week 3 waiver wire. But now I think the biggest part of this is that J.D. McKissic is back in the zero running back conversation. Yes. Put him where you were drafting Nyheim Hines. So I think that's the big takeaway.
Yes, that's it. You spell out the letters of all these stories and it spells out J.D. McKissic. That's it. Because who do they trust? They didn't just magically trust Antonio Gibson because Brian Robinson got shot. That doesn't go away. Now, maybe Antonio Gibson, maybe this is a story like I was telling about Trey Lance, where all this adversity and struggle creates the strength for him to just burst through it and show us what he's really made of. So, if it's 10th, 11th, 12th round, well, I hope that Nyheim Hines is off the board. I'm not taking Antonio Gibson before 9. Can I just take a moment to give some Nyheim Hines hype since Philip Lindsay and Tyson Williams were released? Nyheim Hines is the backup to Jonathan Taylor. So you have add injury upside to Frank Reich telling you take Nyheim Hines in fantasy drafts. But okay, and I can see a path there for Gibson, but McKissic's the guy they trust. Now, Carson Wentz had Nyheim Hines withering on the vine a little bit in the passing game last year, so that's not great. We're going to see Sam Howell there sooner or later. Someone had a good clip where they showed Sam Howell after he made this great scramble and saw the sideline, like the players were like, yeah, like pumped up, and he's going to be the guy. I mean, I don't think that
he was thought of. Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep going, but he was thought of as like the number 1 overall pick before the season started. Right. He was QB1 on a lot of boards. So, that's. Yeah. I mean, I like that. And by the way, Carson Wentz, bad for reality. QB 14 and 6-point touchdown leagues last year for fantasy.
He had about a month in Indianapolis where it looked like, hey, he's playing behind a good offensive line. He's got some pieces around him that work with the running game, taking some pressure off of him, and then it all fell apart. That's what we know with Carson Wentz. Eventually, we know where the story ends. We don't necessarily know how we're going to get there. Another ambiguous backfield that we're learning things about, the Rams.
Yeah, the Rams. I mean, I'm an Akers fader. This goes back to the conversation of why lean into injury when it's going to find you anyway. And there was a point of this offseason where what a great value in the 4th round. No thanks. I'll take AJ Dillon in the next round, or the same. I'll reach up for him. And then you get the co-starters, and you can just pass that off as coach speak, but who was the running back on the Rams we were taking in the 4th round last year in the 3rd round and victory lapping before it even happened? It's Darrell Henderson. And we all know that he's got warts, but if he's the guy that's available in round 10, and I also take issue when the advice is take the cheaper guy. Yes. Okay. I understand that, but everyone else is trying to do that too. I think that the Akers fade, if you're pro Akers, it's, hey, he's the lead running back in a good offense. But why are you going to spend a pick? We're coming back to this theme every time on a player that hasn't done it yet and is coming off the most catastrophic type of injury. We saw him last year and he got most of the snaps. Didn't look too good. Too good. It's who are the players around there? I got in the salary cap auction drafts. Henderson was always there for me for $1. I'm an Akers fader, but as we've seen that they could, I mean, Sony Michel can go across the field and go meet with Sean McVay if it doesn't work out with the coaches in the Chargers locker room.
Yeah. I think that Crackshot brought this up in the chat room, Kyren Williams. And I was not that impressed with Kyren Williams at Notre Dame, but they said they didn't play him because he has a big role. And it's not that difficult. If as a rookie, and he does have passing down chops, if as a rookie the coaches trust him, it's not that difficult to see him starting a game by like week 2 or week 3. And it's the Rams offense, so it should just manufacture numbers for the running back by default, whoever it is. It was Sony Michel last year, Kyren Williams can be as effective as Sony Michel probably at this point in Michel's career. So Kyren Williams is the guy that and he broke his foot. I mean, when a rookie breaks his foot in the spring, you can put a line through. Well, maybe not, because it's a good enough offense. All right, let's wind some things up and then we'll get off the rails. A couple of other.
By the way, Kyren Williams was thought of as the RB3 in this class before the combine.
Yeah, and then he didn't test great. And honestly, his film didn't look like someone who was going to test great. It wasn't going to add to his value, but he's a skilled player, especially in the passing game. Okay, a couple of other house cleaning stuff, and I did an article, folks, Football Guys subscribers, you can check it out, the Cutdown Day Do's you need to know. A couple other things I'll just throw out there, folks. If you like Albert O, Greg Dulcich is on IR with a hamstring. So if you like him, you roll him out there week 1 against Seattle. By the way, that there's a lot of good revenge games in week 1. Ronald Jones did make the Chiefs. I still think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a reasonably good proposition at the ADP he's at, even though he was a terrible proposition at the ADP he had the last 2 years. But Jones is at least on the team. I don't think that really changes much, but it's just the next chapter in a story we were following. And I just want to call out CD Deuce, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He was beloved down here in New Orleans. He made Tom Brady uncomfortable. If you make Tom Brady uncomfortable, you're a hero for you can drink for free forever in New Orleans. Nick Underhill, I think, wrote something good. The definitive voice on the Saints wrote something really good about why this was just inevitable. Because I felt really sad for Saints fans when I saw that the compensation was like a 5th and 6th round pick. And Eagles fans get excited again. I saw some Eagles fans say it's like a dream. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that's happening for the Eagles. Anything else that you think qualifies as something that's gone down in the last 24 hours that folks need to know just in case it's too much drinking from the fire hose?
Yeah, I think you covered all of the main storylines. I think the other one is that the last one, and we could do it one line or you can, whatever you want. But I've been one of the Zeke proponents. I thought Zeke at the end of the 3rd round was such a good pick. Now, people are asking me if I think that the offensive line changes my opinion. Of course, it's not good, right? When Tyron Smith goes out for the year. But Zeke in a bad year was RB7, right? You hated him last year because you drafted him at pick 7. Now you're getting at pick probably 40, but and maybe in a tougher draft, pick 36. If you are a fantasy football player that likes to go wide receiver, Zeke is a get out of jail free card, a life preserver, and now you have a top 12 running back in week 1. I would presume that any credible ranker will have Zeke in their top 12 weekly rankings week 1, because when you look at the options, yes, it's cute to take all these guys, but who's going to get 18 touches and have goal line equity? That's Zeke Elliott. I would lean into him if you're a wide receiver heavy drafter, and even if you're not.
Yeah, I think the third round, James Conner, Nick Chubb are the other running backs. I like the wide receivers in the third round a lot more, and that's obviously a Kyle Pitts round if you want Kyle Pitts. I'm actually going the other direction on Zeke.
I understand.
And get back to me, Alan, because I will have my week 1 projections up at some point next week, and it's Tampa Bay, baby. And I think that's the one point where, like, actually, you're in a pause. Because Zeke he's going to get his money in the running game. If anything, if the Cowboys are rational, it's going to be a Tony Pollard game. That's a Tony Pollard game. That's not a Zeke game, but that doesn't mean it's going to be. We'll see. Here's my thing about Zeke, okay? And it's not really a Zeke take. Bob Sturm, there's so many great people that cover the Cowboys. Bob Sturm, an athletic guy, he basically came out yesterday and said, this team is not trying to win this year. And a whole bunch of other Cowboys people came out to say, like, yep, that's what I've been saying. This team is not trying to win this year. They let go Cooper. They let go Collins. They have cap room. So it's funny, too, because people say the cap's not real. Like, well, look at the Cowboys. The cap is real. But people who cover the Cowboys are saying, no. The cap's not real. They could have kept Cooper. They could have kept Collins. They could have kept both. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to replace these guys. Tyler Smith, I wish I could play the clip. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Mark Schofield. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Mark Schofield. I could be wrong, though. When Tyler Smith got drafted to the Cowboys. And I'm sorry if I'm misremembering who it was. And it was just like, well, this is a Cowboys pick. He's got all the traits, but boy, he needs to be coached up. And here's Jerry Jones out here saying, safe to say he's our left tackle. What?
First round pick. It's time to step up, man.
But the whole book on him was he's not ready. He's not ready for NFL edge rushers. He's not even close to ready. So I just feel like with the Cowboys offense, there's collapse potential. There's collapse potential for the team. Look, the team knows. They know in the locker room you're not trying to win. They know that Mike McCarthy is a sacrificial lamb. Basically, Sturm insinuated that they're trying to make it so when they make major changes this next year, whether Sean Payton or Dan Quinn or whoever, that the fans will be like, yup, that's necessary. I mean, go bet the Eagles to win that division. I don't know what the odds are right now.
I think it changed. I think it flipped a little bit once.
It should flip more than a little bit.
Yeah.
And I feel like, Alan, Zeke is kind of as go the Cowboys, so go Zeke for fantasy. Now I can see Tony Pollard hitting in a year where the Cowboys are like 5-12, not Zeke. We'll see.
The market agrees with you, not me. So,
Well, yeah. And I don't know if that's a good thing. And the other one real quick, I want to put out there, major fail vibes coming from New England offense. New England offense feels like it's the end of, and I feel like the New England writers always need to be kind of polite or tactful. They can't just come out like Bob Sturm did about the Cowboys or like any New York writer does about New York teams.
They're scared.
It looks bad. It looks like New England's offense is going to be really bad. Okay, Alan. Where do we go? Where do we go from here? Right? Because and this was the last house cleaning before we get into the grind, where we're always looking back at what just happened, looking forward to the next week, trying to make sense of it, doing this all on the fly. So we can breathe right now. We can breathe. I guess first, I'll start here since we're on the couch. How did you end up doing this fantasy sports thing as part of how you make a bargain with the world to exist?
Yeah, I was a fantasy sports consumer for a gazillion years, working in an office job, in selling football advertising for many years in New York. Short version, moved to sunny Florida, became a physical education teacher, wrote all the articles,
awesome.
did everything for free, worked with kids. It was great, but they knocked me out, man. It's difficult to, as everyone knows, to manage 70 kids in a classroom in the tough neighborhoods of Florida. But, I was doing a ton of some just like one-off articles for DFS Army and then eventually for Roster Watch on a contributor.
Byron.
Byron Alex. So I was working for them for a year, doing contributions. My role grew with them. And eventually, I have some video editing skills. I have some thumbnail skills. And you've talked about breaking into the fantasy football industry. I think that you've correctly identified. You got to have a multitude of things you could do. You have to be working in a submarine. The captain has to be able to cook the eggs. The chef has to be able to fire the missiles. Yeah. And I think I was able to display that skill set to Rotowire, who, I got lucky, right opportunity. I was sending them content for years for free, and then they hired me full time over the last 2 years. And like you, I was setting my fantasy teams more than I was doing my work and my corporate job, and I never thought it was possible. So, and then to interact with people like you, who I've been listening to. I mean, you're the bridge between, I think. I mean, you've been around. So you're the elder statesman. We're the same age, but you're the elder statesman in fantasy football. I mean, doesn't it seem like yesterday you were like looking up to and listening to podcasts and reading articles of your elder statesman? Now you're that guy now, Sig.
Well, I'm just happy to be there, and I won't say that as long as people like Bob Harris and Paul Charchian and Joe Bryant and many others are around. The architects, they built the sandbox. Bob Harris is actually the one that built the sandbox. If there's one person that's responsible for it, if you trace it back far enough, he's everyone's daddy. What's up, Bob? Got to get him on the couch soon. To touch on something he said as a teacher, I just want to take a moment out. Teachers are heroes. Teachers are heroes. I really feel anybody out there that's a school teacher. And I know Scott Simpson's a school teacher going back for, I want to say he's at his 20th year. I know Mitch Carl, who does my buddy who does Rise or Fall, was a school teacher before he jumped and has this great business, DFS and gambling, betting and things like that. But teachers are heroes. And I think that most everybody who listens to the show knows where I would fall on a lot of those switches. I have a lot of opinions. We were talking before about when eventually I'll do a show that's not about football. It's coming, but it's public school teachers, like what's going on. I mean, we're experiencing an active destruction of the public schools in the New Orleans. Don't even get me started. An active destruction of the public school system. Like when public school teachers are saying, my job is becoming more and more difficult. It's feature, not a bug. And what's amazing is what powers most of the teachers that I know is they actually care about the kids, and it fills them back up to make a difference in a kid's life. And even making a kid just feel seen and heard, which everybody needs and not everybody gets, can be enough to change someone's life. And teachers are heroes. And for anybody out there that is listening to this as part of your life as a school teacher, especially as a public school teacher, you are holding together the fabric of society. You're holding together the fabric of like society like 20 years from now, if it's possible to do that. So good on you. Physical education. Go ahead.
I was going to say that they set us up for a difficult situation. As one teacher, I would have an average class size of about 68 kids. Imagine trying to manage 68. Yeah. I would do kindergarten through 8th grade. Imagine trying to manage 57 kindergartners, or it's like you have no shot for survival. It's all it is just trying to, just keep chaos. I mean, it's organized chaos. That's all it is in my experience. Now, of course, I went to where I grew up, where I went to school. It wasn't like that. There was 23 kids in a PE class. It's just that some, like you talked about New Orleans and where I am in Duval County in Florida, it was, it like you, if it wasn't for helping the kids, you would probably
that's what powers it.
Yeah.
Powers it is the goodwill of people.
But I tapped out after about 5 years, especially when I had an opportunity to do something like this on a full-time basis.
Because we all have to. It's just like on the airplane. You have to put your own mask on before you can help the child. Like if you're not getting oxygen, then how can you help anybody else? Yep. New York to South Florida. So do you mean New York City proper, like the 5 boroughs?
So I grew up in Long Island, but I lived in Manhattan forever, for about 20 years. We were there and lived in the East Village of Manhattan. Anyone that's been to New York. Yeah.
You lived in the East Village when it actually was still like the East Village.
Yes. And, when, my wife and I, we made it she told me one day, I was making a good living in my sales job. And she said, hey, why don't you quit your job and let's move to Florida? And I said, what knowing you don't quit your job. That's not something you do. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, fast forward 7 years, she was 100% right, because she said, what's the point of doing all these things just so we can get to a climate we want to get to anyway? Right. I've learned that there's not a lot of difference between, making, let's call, the average American salary and, $100,000. Yes, there might be if you have kids and responsibilities, but when it's just the two of us, you're like, you don't always have to chase money. What she taught me was chasing happiness and the pursuit, and not just talking about it, actually doing it is really what the life changer is. It's not about accumulating, wealth, although we all want that too.
Well, wealth is just another way to get at the things that make you feel better, whatever those things are.
Buys freedom.
Yeah, whatever that is for folks. And everybody's got to figure it out for themselves. Everybody, as my father taught me, you're the one that has to live with your choices. So make choices for yourself. Those other people don't have to live with your choices. You do. But I think that our culture only teaches us to rate success in terms of money or wealth or future wealth or whatever. And there's a lot of other things. And I think that we're like only a couple of minutes left. So like, this is the topic. This is what my other show has got to be for it. So I got to do the other show. Right. I just think that if you take stock, there was a book my mom gave me. I can't tell a story without taking another story. But I remember the first year I came home from college at Thanksgiving or sometime like that. And I was just getting into fish, and I played some for my mom, and she said, "Oh my God, Siggy." She called me Siggy. Siggy, you're a hippie. And she gave me this book, DOS Energy, that was like a new age hippie dippy. I think Paul Williams was the name of the writer in the 70s. And it had some stuff that was like, again, like sort of flowery stuff, but it had a few things that really stuck with me. And one of them was, you are an instrument that is tuned to detect what makes you happy. So listen to it. And it's going to guide you. You're going to find that golden thread of destiny. It's going to guide you to your destiny. And I guess on that note, go ahead.
I was just going to add that you were talking about like what we think those things we want, and hippie is so funny because you could say hippie to a 25. They don't even know what you're talking about nowadays. But but I love it because the hippie is what we called people, the tree hugger types. But meanwhile, they had it figured out. We always looked down upon them when we were walking to our corporate jobs with our suits. Meanwhile, they had it figured out. They had a freedom that I didn't even realize I wanted. Sig, you told me last year, you said that on social media, you reveal things about yourself, but they're different than the things you think you're revealing. I think I know what you mean, but I think this is important and ties into what you were talking about. I would love to hear some of the experiences that specifically you're talking about, and maybe even as it relates to, what we experience in fantasy football world of Twitter.
Oh, geez. I mean, the thing is, you're asking me this with just a couple of minutes left. And this is like a whole other show. So we in the off season next year, we will do like a pure life experience show. Okay. Remind me, because I never remember anything I say anymore, and I'm 47.
I'll have you over to the podcast that I do it too. And then you can do whatever. But okay.
Part of it is, I'll say this just in general, and then we'll come back to it at a later date. Just that hopefully as you get older, you learn the power of I don't care. Matt Waldman and others and I were just talking about this. Matthew Berry, who just went over to NBC, and Matt Waldman pointed out, it's not really I don't care. It's I don't care. Again, back to this theme of like what other people say is what makes life good.
Judgment.
What you feel inside of yourself that makes life good. And hopefully you stop making the same mistakes. You learn yourself well enough to stop making the same mistakes. Maybe make some new mistakes. And I say I'm 47. I'm getting old. And I want to end the show on this note because it was sad. I just contributed to the Mike Tagliere. Tag is such a bright light. Another bright light. Just found out this morning waking up. Stephen White, former Buccaneer, passed away at 48. I know he had been talking about a battle he had, I think, with leukemia. And I had a lot of good interactions with Steve. This isn't about me though. It was about Stephen White. And he brought to bear in his work all SGW 94. Hopefully you're familiar with his work if you follow me and you listen to the show. He brought to bear all of the hard-earned experience and knowledge he had as a football player in the trenches, but it was fun. It was fun. He made it fun. If you're watching a game and you see a player saying like, "That's a bad mofo," Stephen Wright would write the articles like, "Yeah, he is," and let me break down for you how he is. I loved it. The enthusiasm, the exuberance he had for the game in a way that he could teach us about the game and share in that exuberance and its excitement. And it just makes me feel like, man, there's just too many players dying too young. And I hope we can have a stretch here. There's been a lot of deaths in the jazz world too lately. Just too many. It just hurts. It hurts. And it's the shadow. Grief is the shadow cast by love, and these people generate all this love, and the grief is proportional to that. But I just wanted to take a moment out to remember Stephen White and everything he contributed, and just a rest in peace out to him. But now I turn around and say, hey, part of what makes this life so precious to us is serving everybody. It's a joy. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege. As I said, next week, the roller coaster, here we go. Make sure you're tall enough to ride, fasten the seatbelt. And let's take another journey together, folks. It's always a joy to share this experience with you because you're so classy.